I believe that we've all been chosen. I believe I have been chosen, A lot of people nowadays, especially our age, they just want to, they want to fit in, but Christ doesn't call us to fit in. He calls us to stand out. My full name is Peter Elwood Real Jr. I go by PJ, Peter Jr. I'm 18 years old. I live in Appomattox, Virginia. I go to Hampton-Sydney College. I'm going to be a sophomore over there now. I plan on studying economics and business. And just recently, I've gotten real passionate about just learning Spanish, like as a language. And I feel like learning another language would just help me in everyday life, but like it'll also help me down the road and potentially going on mission trips and just telling others about Jesus. So going to Hampton-Sydney, it's a blessed time over there. Wasn't my first choice of a college. I don't play any sports over there, but I still attend FCA. I still lead FCA Bible studies. But really, the main reason I went down there is to spread the gospel. Like I said, I attend many FCA event. And I just try to stay involved in anything I can that is just Jesus related.
What do you like to do when you're not doing stuff at FCA?
Right now I work at a shoe store. I'm really big into fashion. I just recently launched my own clothing brand. Just busy with the clothing brand, working at a shoe store. Trying to save up some money so I can, one, pay off college, but two, launch this clothing brand. I just recently interned. I just became an intern with FCA. We're constantly having meetings with different FCA representatives. I enjoy it. Like, even though I don't play any sports, I still like staying physically active. So whether that's going back to my high school and playing, like throwing the ball with some guys, or I have I have a weight room, 5 steps out my door. So, nothing too crazy. Just Jesus, working out, and Baines here in Appomattox, downtown Appomattox. We have something called Baines. It's a coffee and bookstore. So I'm always going there. I love me a nice little latte. I'll go get a latte and do a Bible study. Right now I'm reading through the New Testament. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I don't play sports either, but it's nice to kind of have that role with FCA, even as a non-athlete. What kind of clothes is your brand going to focus
on? It's more so like right now it's just more of like a unique streetwear type of look. So for my first 2 drops, it's like we have boxy tees. In high school, I just had regular, Gildan shirts, just nothing too crazy. But for my first couple of drops, I wanted to make something. I wanted it to be unique, right? And my brand it's called Chozn, right? Because I believe that we've all been chosen. I believe I have been chosen. At Matt Camp, we talked about calling an assignment. And how we all have an assignment, how assignments change. But I feel like my assignment is to fulfill the Great Commission. And just clothing, right? Fashion, that is an area that the Lord has blessed me. That's just a gift that the Lord has given me to fulfill the Great Commission and to just make a dent in spreading the gospel. So yeah, just boxy tees, unique streetwear for right now. But eventually, once it warms up, we'll have hoodies, we'll have sweatpants. Once it cools up, we'll have hoodies and sweatpants and all types of stuff. There's no telling what the Lord's gonna do with it. It's crazy. The Lord, what He has done for me already with this clothing brand thing, it has been a blessing, and there's really no telling where He's going to take it. So,
let's talk about your faith, PJ. It's been important for you, as you've mentioned, but kind of give us a brief overview of your faith journey. Has it been something lifelong, something kind of picked up later in life? Kind of talk a little bit about that, my man.
For sure. Grew up. I grew up a Christian. Grew up in a Christian household. We had Bible verses on the wall, recited prayer before dinner. I lived right across from the church, actually. Every Sunday, me and my family would walk across the street to go to church until my little sister was born. I have a brother and a sister. My brother, he is 16. My sister is 11. So when my sister was born, we just stopped going. It was kind of difficult, going with a newborn crying all the time. So I kind of just fell out the church there. I have thank God for grandmothers. I have a crazy Christian grandmother. So every time I would go over there, she babysit me a lot. And every time I would go over there, very religious woman, I got to hear about Jesus. But I never really had a relationship. I've always been involved in religion, but I've never had a relationship with Christ. Got into high school, my identity became football. I come from Appomattox, 5-time state champion. 5-time state champions in football. We had a 3-peat, back to back to back. That was amazing. And then so by the time I got into high school, I was like, okay, I want to ring. I remember going to the games when I was younger, and I could just hear the crowd screaming and just chant, and I was like, okay, that's who I want to be. But I went to FCA camp, not because of Christianity, not because of chapel, but because my football coach, he told me, he's like, hey guys, we're having this football camp. We would love, we want you to go. And I was like, if he's telling me to go, I'm definitely going to go. So I went strictly for football my first year. This was my sophomore year. I went strictly for football. And I went there, and they told us that our speaker for the week was going to be Cedric Pierman, right? Cedric Pierman, he's a professional NFL running back. He played for 4 different professional sports teams. It was like the Rams, the Bengals. He was all over the place. So they brought him out to come speak to us, and I was so excited. I grabbed my pen, I grabbed my paper. I was like actually dialed in, because I wasn't there for religion. I was there for football, right? And so when Cedric came out, I was like looking at him. I was like, okay, he's a somebody. This is who I want to be when I get older. So just let me pay attention to him. And he came out and he started crying. And I just remember being so angry, like why is this dude crying? I looked up to him so much. He brought his family out. He had a beautiful family. This guy, he's probably rich. He's got the platform. He's got the fame. He played professional. He played in the NFL. That's everybody's dream. That was my dream at the time. I felt that was my assignment at the time. But as we talked about it, Mac, assignments do change. So he came out and he started crying in front of a room of 300 teenagers, and I just remember being so angry at him. And I'm looking around to see if anybody else is buying it. Is anybody else listening to this guy? Why is he crying? And then that night, as I'm looking around, I see everyone with their hands in the air. I see people on their knees crying. And like I said, I grew up in religion, but I never grew up in relationship with Christ. So being at FCA camp for the first time, I got to see what relationship was like, and I got to see the Holy Spirit move through so many people. And that night, I felt something, right? I was overcome by the Holy Spirit that night. And I didn't know what it was yet. But later that night, I went and talked to a couple of huddle leaders, and they told me all about Jesus Christ. And then that's when relationship came into play. And I was like, okay, now, because it was no longer just I believe. I grew up saying I believe in God, right? But now I'm 100% sure that He's real. I'm 100% certain that Christianity is real, that God is real, right? Because I have experienced it. After FCA, my sophomore year, I was like, okay, I'm dedicated now. I want to start reading my Bible more and stuff like that. So probably about a month after FCA, my first FCA camp, I was on fire. I was doing good. But then the world hit. I fell right back into sin. I took my identity out of FCA. I took my identity out of relationship with Christ, and I put it right back into football. And then FCA camp rolls up again. And I'm like, all right, this is my second time. I'm like, I can do this. I need to do this. And I went strictly for Christianity. I went strictly for church. I went strictly for relationship. Didn't even care about football. And it was one of the best weeks of my life. It's always a blessing going to FCA camp. And after that, I was on fire. At my school, we had an FCA at our school. I grew up in FCA. After every Tuesday practice, we'd have FCA, which means we'd have a representative come and they'd bring us pizza and they'd share the gospel with us and stuff. But no, pretty much grew up in FCA. And then so when FCA came around again, it was my second time going. I was on fire. I was on fire for it. And we had FCA in our school, and that was probably around 6 people at the time. This was going into my junior year. Well, this was in my junior year. We probably had 6 people in FCA, and I was like, I felt called to be a part of FCA. And I started it wasn't like a faith thing anymore. Like I said, it was I knew Jesus was real, right? And I wanted to tell the whole world about him, right? I got to experience his peace, his joy, his kindness, right? His love, right? And as soon as I experienced those things, I wanted to tell the world about it. I wanted to tell my school about it. So I joined FCA, which is our Bible study, and it was me and Daniel, and there was a couple coaches, and we would bring some friends here and there. It was every Thursday morning at 7:15. And so it started off as 6 people in the middle of my junior year. My last FCA Bible study, my senior year, we had 137 students, right? Regularly in attendance. It was we probably had around 100. It was never less than 80. And that's something that the Lord had worked through me and Daniel to do. Me and Daniel, we kind of took a hold of it. My job, it was either I was speaking or I was finding a speaker. to come and speak, right? So I kind of got in with all the pastors in Appomattox, and I was constantly meeting up. I was getting lunch with pastors. I was being discipled. Um, and so what God had done through me in my high school, it was such a blessing. It started off with just me and Daniel and four others, right? And then it spread to my football team, and then it spread to all the other sports teams, and then eventually it spread to my school, right? And then from my school, it spread to my community during the summer. It might have been I think it was my senior year, like after I graduated and everything. Me and Daniel, we hosted a Appomattox tent revival in our community. We got these massive tents, and we got this blow up projector, and I mean, we just worshiped, and we had 6 speakers. I spoke, Daniel spoke. We had a couple other guys. We had a couple pastors speak. I mean, and just like looking back, it's just such a blessing, and it's just so crazy to think how like me going to FCA just for football, kind of just led to me leading, to me leading to like telling others about Jesus, to me telling my community about Jesus. I mean, now I'm on fire for him, so I decided I wanted to intern with FCA. And I knew a couple of representatives, so I started talking to them, and we started meeting regularly. At the end of my senior year, football ended, didn't really know what to do. I had a couple D3 offers. I would have loved to play football in college. But like we've been mentioning, assignments change, and Liberty University, it's 20 minutes up the road from me. I would have I would have loved to go on there and just strengthen my relationship with Christ. But all my senior year, I kept hearing about Hampton Sydney College, and that's where a lot of my friends would go, right? A lot of my Christian friends would go there. Even some of the leaders, right? Some of the leaders in FCA, they would go there, and I would just hear stories about them, and how sin plays a huge part in any college campus, but especially at Hampton Sydney. And a lot of my friends were going there, and they just became, they were overcome by sin. They were overcome by, just darkness. And like I had Daniel was going there for football, and, and I was just I felt I felt empowered, right? I felt like I was called to go to Hampton City, not to partake in sin, not to play football, but to tell them about the gospel. And so my first year, I went to Hampton City, and like with the sole purpose, people are like, okay, what sport do you play? Like no, I'm a Christian. That's the hardest sport you can play in any college. That takes mad practice. Game days are like every day. You have to know your plays. You have to know scripture, right? So I went to Hampton City to kind of just to fulfill the Great Commission, I guess in a way. And I feel like colleges, right? Great Commission is Matthew 28:19. Jesus comes back from the dead, and he gives his disciples one final assignment. He says, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, right? And like this verse, I feel like called me to go to Sydney. So I went to Hampton Sydney, and my first year, man, God worked miracles again. He definitely blessed me throughout high school, and he definitely blessed me with my first year of college. My first week of college, it was rough. I was very discouraged. Saw a lot of sin. I saw more drugs my first week of college than I've seen in my life. Seen more women my first week of college. Like I could open my dorm room door, and I could kind of just pick, whatever woman I like. That's how it was. It was crazy. I could walk into any room and get any drug I wanted. I could walk into any room and get any beer I wanted. I could get a fake ID if I wanted to. And so like just that first week, it was dark. I felt abandoned. Like I'm coming off of this Jesus high. God worked through me. God worked through me all summer. He worked through me all my senior year of high school. And I'm like, God, you called me to be here at Hampton City. You called me to change the world. You called me to change Hampton City, Lord. And I got there my first week, and it hit me, and I felt abandoned. I felt lost. I even thought about, like switching back, transferring to another school within my first week. But looking back now, God was working that whole entire week. He was working that entire week. I didn't feel him at all, but he was there. Like that's when he was there the most. Because my first year of college, I was able to be a part of several Bible studies. There was probably about 10 different Bible studies I could attend. I was going there. I was just preaching the gospel to my friends. I was going to parties, right? But I'm not a party guy, right? I don't drink. I don't smoke. I've never done that. And I've never had the passion to do it, the desire to do it. So I would attend these parties, right? And I have like a yoo-hoo in my hand, right? Because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. I'm used to, if I'm going to a band, it's a Christian band, my hands are in the air praising God, right? But I was going to these secular worldly parties, and I didn't know what to do with my hands. So I would bring a yoo-hoo, and people would come up to me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you got a yoo-hoo!" And that's right there. I would tell them about Jesus. I would tell them about why. And that's how God worked through me. I didn't attend all the parties. I didn't attend all the events, but the ones I did attend, I made sure to spread the gospel and be the light of the world. But first year was amazing. I got to speak at our sister, not our sister college, but we have Longwood University, which is a D1 college, which is right beside Hampton-Sydney. I was able to go over there and speak at a revival. I've led several Bible studies, and overall, God has opened so many doors for me in my first year. And going into my sophomore year, I'm just excited to go and just to work, and just the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. My freshman year, God showed me the harvest, and I'm just ready to go to work now.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Good for you, man.
Yes, sir.
God is working through you in so many different ways. That's awesome. I want to just touch on a couple of things you said. How do you engage young people in the Word of God to go from 6 people to 140 people? You obviously seem like you got a whole lot of personality, so maybe your personality drives people to you.
Yeah.
But how do you engage young people in learning more about Christ?
So, a lot of people, when they look at religion, they think it is for a certain ethnicity. They think it's for a certain person. They think it's for a certain social class. They think it's for a certain race. But in reality, like religion is for everybody. And so like when I found that out, like it literally is for everybody. It's for the youth. It's for old people. It's for this color and that color. It's for people all over the world. So I found that out, and I was like, okay. Not a lot of people knew that. They were like, okay, I'll just wait. A lot of people in my school, they're like, they wanted to have fun in the world. They wanted to be cool, right? I wanted to be cool, right? I wanted to be a football player, right? So this was like exiting my junior year is kind of when, we took that 6 and turned it to 137, 136, right? So I kind of already had the platform, right? And then so my goal was just to make Christ cool, right? So I started up my clothing brand in high school, right? I went from, wearing like all these cool, designer shirts, what I thought was cool, all these secular worldly shirts, fashion, right? I went from wearing that to wearing, like I'd come home that day and because right here in the basement, I have I have all different types of machines that I can make shirts with. And so I'd come home and I'd make me a super cool graphic, Jesus tee. And I'd wear that the next day to school, and like the Lord, he worked through me, and I've got to experience his love, joy, peace, and just like his kindness, right? And then so going to school, it was just so easy. It was so easy to spread that with others. It was so easy, right? Me and Daniel, our favorite verse is, you are the light of the world, right? A city set upon a hill, a lamp set up. Oh gosh, I just butchered that, right? Mine and Daniel's favorite verse, right, is the one about the light of the world, right? You are the light of the world, right? A city set upon a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do you light a lamp and put it on a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house, right? So me and Daniel, we felt called to be the light of our school. I did this through fashion. I did this through, just face-to-face talking with people. But I mean, it went from just us starting with, like I said, it started with our football team, like being leaders, right? Being leaders on a team. I had influence, I was able to influence others to kind of like join this Bible study. Like, hey guys, stay after practice, attend FCA, and once they did that, they were like, okay, like I want to go in the mornings, right? And then, all the football players, where are all the football players Thursday morning at 7:15? They're at Bible study. And then so, then that's when like, the cheerleaders, they came and joined, right? And then the cheerleaders, they have their friends like softball, right? And then there was like all the sports, right? And then it got to the point where people were coming up to us and they were like, hey, I don't play a sport, but I see that you guys are doing this and I want to be a part of it, right? And then so it just got to the point where it wasn't only sports and athletes, it was everybody. It was teachers, right? Teachers would bring their families, right? Students would bring their parents. And overall, it was just it's so crazy even just to think about it. I definitely do miss it. I went a couple times, maybe about a month ago. They had their last one, the second, right? When is the second? Tomorrow, right? Tomorrow they're having one, an FCA Bible study at a local ice cream shop. So if I'm not doing nothing, I might have to go check that out as well. So it's kind of like the Lord placed the fire in me. I just kind of, through God, through Christ, he allowed me to spread that fire through others. And other people, man, like they went to their sports teams and they went to their sports teams. So by all means, it wasn't just me that did this. It was through Daniel, it was through coaching I was through the coaching staff. I was blessed to be able to print flyers. I printed flyers and hung them all around the school. And a lot of places you don't get to do that. Here in America, here in Appomattox, I was definitely blessed to be able to freely spread the gospel, to freely invite others to join FCA Bible study. So
That is awesome, man. Good for you. Good for you.
yes, sir.
You in your bio, you have Luke 15:24 as one of as a verse that means a lot to you. Besides, you are the light of the world. Talk
Yeah,
about Luke 15:24. I think I was looking here. It's about the prodigal son.
yeah. Right. So I like just reading, reading throughout my Bible, it got to the part of the prodigal son, and in Luke 15:24 it says, he was lost, right? Or he was dead, but now my son is dead, but now he's alive. He was lost, but now he is found. Right. And I have that in there. It's just a constant reminder to myself, that I'm dead. My old self is dead. Like I'm born again, after my senior year of high school, I went and got baptized. Like that, like right here, I have a little Jesus right here, I'm just so on fire for the Lord, and just I'm no longer living in sin. I'm no longer shackled by sin, weighed down by things of my past. And so there was a time when I didn't know Jesus. There was a time where I didn't have that relationship with him. There was a time where I was dead in my sin, but I found Jesus, and I'm proof, my testimony, like I'm a living example. That Jesus really does save, that Jesus really does. He picks you up, he turns you around. So Luke 15:24, my son was dead, now he is alive. He was lost, but now he is found. And I like to think that when I go to heaven, that's something that God will say to me, like I was lost, but he has found me. I was dead in my sin, but because of Jesus Christ, I'm now alive.
Yeah, it's nice to know that Christ still loves us despite all our shortcomings and all our failures.
Yeah,
One final question here for you.
for sure.
What might you make the pitch to someone who may not believe in Christ? They may think Christ is not real. They may think Christ is not for them. Make the pitch to them, PJ, as to why you think it's worth it for them to still get invested in it.
For sure. Well, first, we all have, we've all experienced religion. We've all experienced, Christianity. A lot of people are hurt. A lot of people are hurting nowadays. And like, even the church, some people are hurt by the church. Some people may have been hurt by a Christian brother or a Christian sister, and that's why they've turned. So, I like to get to know these people more. Like to get to know their testimony a little bit. But for me, I would probably just share mine. Like I was the same way. I was the same way. A lot of people nowadays, especially our age, they just want to, they want to fit in, but Christ doesn't call us to fit in. He calls us to stand out, right? He calls us to be holy, right? One of our words at Matt Camp was glory, right? That was our main word. And if you looked at other words similar to glory, or words that meant glory, holy was one of them. And if you look up the definition of holy, it says to be set apart, to be different, right? And throughout high school, I felt like that was my calling. So I would tell these people, I would go walk up to them, and I'd ask them their story, I'd ask them their testimony, but then I would also give them mine, right? And I tell them how, like, I thought football, right? I had my identity in football, right? I had my identity in the world at a point. I wanted to do what everybody else was doing, right? And for them, that might be their case, right? But when I went to FCA camp, and I saw all these people, with their hands in the air, I thought they were all crazy, right? I honestly did. I thought everybody was crazy. I see them crying, and I'm like looking around, and I'm like, well, they can't all be crazy, So I would just tell them, like, you just gotta like look around. You have to just know that, like, what Christianity is. Just have that relationship with Jesus. I would point them to the gospel. I'd point them to John 3:16, right? But then I would point them to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, right? And I would tell them, like, if you don't believe, right? Like if you don't believe yet, if you're turning your back on it, I was like, you have nothing else to lose. Like you already say you don't believe it, so like, what do you have to lose by reading it? And I would just send them like little verses here and there, because even though I'm so on fire for the Lord, I have people in my family who aren't. I have people in my family who are not saved. I have people in my family who practice witchcraft, and so what I would do is I would just go to them, and man, we don't even need to start off by talking about religion or anything, just I want to go there, and I want to be the example, I want to be a leader for them. Like, let's say we're going to a camp, let's say we're going to a family dinner, Like when I'm at that dinner, I want to treat. It's my aunt, right? I have an aunt who practices witchcraft, right? Who doesn't believe in anything. She's atheist, right? But she still like she does like all these crystals and stuff, right? And so when I go there, I don't just push the Bible onto her, right? But instead, I just show her. I show her what Jesus would do, right? I give her love. I show her like peace and stuff like that, joy, right? And I show her how joyful I am, how happy I am, right? So then that way, when she does ask, I can tell her all about Jesus, because he really does bring transformation. And so like these people that are lost, I just try to be a good friend to them. I try to just, get that one-on-one time with them. There was this one kid in my weight room class my senior year, quiet kid. Just he never really participated, always stood in the corner. He had like long hair, and like he just stayed out the way, right? And I saw him walking home one day, and me, I was driving at the time, and so I pulled over and I was like, "Yo, you need a ride?" Right? And he hopped in the car, and I mean, I took him to McDonald's. We had a conversation about like we were just talking about everything. Like, yo, do you play a sport? How's your home life, right? And then at the end, he asked me, he was like just like, why are you you? Like, why is your personality? Why are you so outgoing? Like, why did you stop and pick me up? And then that's when I was able to tell him all about Jesus Christ. I was able to share with him my testimony and how God took me, a sinner, right, whose identity was in the world, whose identity was in football, and I just how he changed me to just be who I am now. Just a servant of Christ, the Son of God.
Well, please keep this fire going, PJ. You're really going in the right direction. I appreciate your time sharing your testimony. Would love to have you back to keep this conversation going and keep all those gems coming, my man. I appreciate you.
For sure. Yes, sir.